And that's what a lot of this is. A lot of this smothering, I should say, of this kind of stuff of, oh, everything's okay, everything's
Mother
okay.
Russianing.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason. There's a reason it's called the motherland. It's as long as it's mothering and smothering. It's like, oh, everything's okay, okay. It's like, okay, well then now you're a tyrant because you have to keep it okay.
Yeah.
You have to make it. You have to change the
Yeah.
entire world to make it okay.
Yeah, and it's funny because the same people who are pushing for these things are the people who would condemn book burnings and bannings.
No, well they condemn their book burnings and bannings.
Exactly. And it's just mind blowing to me. But you're right that the mothering view is probably the best way to look at it. They're trying to take and round off any sharp edge. And there's a lot of places that we can see this. But Dan, you and I grew up with movies and TV shows and stuff that were made with kids in mind during the 80s and 90s. And those kid movies had sharp edges.
Yeah.
And we love those movies, and they are absolutely adored, not just by us, but by generations after us will go back and watch those movies and love them. And yeah, they might be afraid of them a little bit, or there may be parts of them that make them uncomfortable, but they're supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was, it was okay to see, okay, well, this character's dad is an alcoholic and he's scared to go home because he knows his dad's been drinking. He's going to beat him.
You knew that
when
kid,
he gets
or
home.
you were that kid.
Exactly. And to round off and sand the edges off of that, or to sand off the edges to where, like, I mean, you and I both we grew up watching like the Home Alone movies.
Mm-hmm.
And you watch like the first, especially the first Home Alone movie, that movie was not afraid to show you that the strange person that weird, strange man in your neighborhood was somebody you probably needed to leave alone.
Mm-hmm.
Like to deal with the actual fear of adults saying that an adult could hurt me.
Yeah.
It's actually a good thing for kids to see. Hey, you know what? Not every adult out there is gonna protect you. Most of them are probably dangerous to you, so you should avoid them.
Well, to be fair, a lot of people writing stuff for kids now don't have kids, and they're still children, but they're not. They're like 20 to 30-year-old children. And when you're a kid, you want to grow up, but what has to happen is adults are supposed to create a path for you to grow up properly. And that's what stories were for. Is like, here's good, here's bad, here's how you do this, and you want to be the good guy because not only are they virtuous, but they're cool. Well, then what happens is, you start making the bad guy cooler. And that kind of brings things down. And then you make everybody stupid and you make them childish. Like a lot of, there's a reason millennial humor is so cringy, where everything is so kiddie and stupid and laughed at, and it's pathetic. And there is no like good and bad anymore. Everything's gray and everybody's an awful person. They don't know how to be an adult. And I mean, I don't quite frankly, I don't know how it's anybody's business. This just seems like very mommy state or nanny state. It's like, it's none of your business how this person wrote his book. Just don't buy it for your kid if you don't like it. And that's the whole thing.
That's my thing. I mean, a few years ago we saw this with the Dr. Seuss, but at least with Dr. Seuss, they said like there's just a small handful of books that looking at them now we feel like. We don't necessarily want to take those specific books. And to be fair, the ones they pulled, there's a good reason for why they pulled them. But that's fine. We don't want to publish these anymore. Yeah, you have the right to do that.
A publisher reserves the right not to publish.
It.
Yeah, exactly. The publisher
right, but they didn't
the right.
change it.
Yeah, that's a big difference.
And there's a huge difference between saying we're not comfortable with putting more copies of this out for kids. And saying, we're going to, and it was also, to be fair, the books that they pulled that were Dr. Seuss books, those were not like Cat in the Hat. And I mean, you look at all the conservatives and the way they respond to it, they acted like Hop on Pop and Cat in the Hat and Green Eggs and Ham were disappearing, and they're
Yeah.
not. It was some old, much older books that were much more obscure. They weren't kid. They were something I'd never even heard of.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but what we're talking about here is taking well-known, beloved, classic children's books and changing them after the death of the author. That's not okay.
Yeah, this is more insidious because it's one thing to remove something and someone can go get it. It's another thing to utilize something for the first steps of potential indoctrination or propaganda, which is what this is. This
Right.
I'm not saying what the changes they put in there are that, but when you say this is okay, you open the door to allow that.
It's setting a precedent
Mm-hmm.
that should not be allowed to be set.
Well, and people bring up the idea that slippery slope is a fallacy. It's like, look, no, the way I function is if I think that I could do something for my own personal gain that's nefarious, I guarantee you activist groups and governments have already thought of it or will do it, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
there's a reason Epstein didn't Epstein himself.